Hello everyone. I thought it might be nice to just at the end of the week enjoy something together, and I was wondering what to do, and I thought perhaps if I read a book. I've done this in the past long ago, and I thought maybe C.S. Lewis's Great Divorce. You might have read it yourself. If you have, please don't feel you have to bear through this with me. But I thought it might be nice to read it. It's a great encouragement, and it gives us an idea, an imaginative idea from C.S. Lewis of what heaven and hell may be like. And I'm going to start today just reading the preface and chapter 1. And then when we can, I'll read on through the chapters 2, 3, 4, and so on. And I think we'll get through it before the end of this pandemic, when we are all closed up in our houses. So here we go. We start with a preface, and I'm now reading. Blake wrote The Marriage of Heaven and Hell. If I've written of their divorce, this is not because I think myself a fit antagonist for so great a genius, nor even because I feel at all sure that I know what he meant. But in some sense or other, the attempt to make that marriage is perennial. The attempt is based on the belief that reality never presents us with an absolutely unavoidable either-or, that granted skill and patience, and above all, time enough, some way of embracing both alternatives can always be found, that mere development or adjustment or refinement will somehow turn evil into good, without our being called on for a final and total rejection of anything we should like to retain. This belief I take to be a disastrous error. You cannot take all luggage with you on all journeys. On one journey, even your right hand and your right eye may be among the things you have to leave behind. We are not living in a world where all roads are radii of a circle, and where all, if followed long enough, will therefore draw gradually nearer and finally meet at the center. Rather, in a world where every road, after a few miles, forks into two, and each of those into two again, and at each fork you must make a decision. Even on the biological level, life is not like a river, but like a tree. It does not move towards unity, but away from it, and the creatures grow further apart as they increase in perfection. Good, as it ripens, becomes continually more different, not only from evil, but from other good. I do not think that all who choose wrong roads perish, but their rescue consists in being put back on the right road. A sum can be put to right, but only by picking back till you find the error and working it afresh from that point, never by simply going on. Evil can be undone, but it cannot develop into good. Time does not heal it. The spell must be unwound bit by bit, with backward mutters of deserving power, or else not. It is still either or. If we insist on keeping hell, or even earth, we shall not see heaven. If we accept heaven, we shall not be able to retain even the smallest and most intimate souvenirs of hell. I believe, to be sure, that any man who reaches heaven will find that what he abandoned, even in plucking out his right eye, has not been lost, that the kernel of what he was really seeking, even in his most depraved wishes, will be there, beyond expectation, waiting for him in the high countries. In that sense, it will be true for those who have completed the journey, and for no others, to say that good is everything and heaven everywhere. But we at this end of the road must not try to anticipate that retrospective vision. If we do, we are likely to embrace the false and disastrous converse and fancy that everything is good and everywhere is heaven. But what, you ask, of earth? Earth, I think, will not be found by anyone to be in the end a very distinct place. I think earth, if chosen instead of heaven, will turn out to have been all along only a region in hell. And earth, if put second to heaven, to have been from the beginning a part of heaven itself. There are only two things more to be said about this small book. Firstly, I must acknowledge my debt to a writer whose name I've forgotten and whom I read several years ago in a highly colored American magazine of what they call scientific fiction. The unbendable and unbreakable quality of my heavenly matter was suggested to me by him, though he used the fancy for a different and most ingenious purpose. His hero travelled into the past, and there very properly found raindrops that would pierce him like bullets and sandwiches that no strength could bite, because of course nothing in the past can be altered. I, with less originality, but, I hope, equal propriety, have transferred this to the eternal. If the writer of that story ever reads these lines, I ask him to accept my grateful acknowledgement. The second thing is this: I beg readers to remember that this is a fantasy. It has, of course, or I intended it to have, a moral. But the transmortal conditions are solely an imaginative supposal. They are not even a guess or a speculation at what may actually await us. The last thing I wish is to arouse factual curiosity about the details of the afterworld. C.S. Lewis, April 1945. Well, so much for the preface, but that sets the scene for the book. And now on to chapter 1. I seemed to be standing in a bus queue by the side of a long, mean street. Evening was just closing in, and it was raining. I'd been wandering for hours in similar mean streets, always in the rain and always in evening twilight. Time seemed to have paused on that dismal moment when only a few shops have lit up and it's not yet dark enough for their windows to look cheering. And just as the evening never advanced to night, so my walking had never brought me to the better parts of the town. However far I went, I found only dingy lodging houses, small tobacconists, hoardings from which posters hung in rags, windowless warehouses, goods stations without trains, and bookshops of the sort that sell the works of Aristotle. I never met anyone. But for the little crowd at the bus stop, the whole town seemed to be empty. I think that was why I attached myself to the queue. I had a stroke of luck right away, for just as I took my stand, a little waspish woman, who would have been ahead of me, snapped out at a man who seemed to be with her. "Very well then, I won't go at all, so there," and left the queue. "Pray don't imagine," said the man, in a very dignified voice, "that I care about going in the least. I have only been trying to please you, for peace sake. My own feelings are, of course, a matter of no importance. I quite understand that." And suiting the action to the word, he also walked away. Come, thought I, that's 2 places gained. I was now next to a very short man with a scowl, who glanced at me with an expression of extreme disfavour and observed, rather unnecessarily loudly, to the man beyond him, "This sort of thing really makes one think twice about going at all." "What sort of thing?" growled the other, a big beefy person. "Well," said the short man, "this is hardly the sort of society I'm used to, as a matter of fact." "Huh!" said the big man, and then added with a glance at me, "Don't you stand any sauce from him, mister? You're not afraid of him, are you?" Then, seeing I made no move, he rounded suddenly on the short man and said, "Not good enough for you, aren't we? Like your lip." Next moment he had fetched the short man one on the side of the face that sent him sprawling into the gutter. Let him lay," said the big man, to no one in particular. "I'm a plain man, that's what I am, and I got to have my rights same as anyone else, see?" As the short man showed no disposition to rejoin the queue, and soon began limping away, I closed up, rather cautiously, behind the big man, and congratulated myself on having gained yet another step. A moment later, 2 young people in front of him also left us, arm in arm. They were both so trousered, slender, giggly, and falsetto that I could not be sure of the sex of either, but it was clear that each for the moment preferred the other to the chance of a place in the bus. "We shall never all get in," said a female voice with a whine in it from some 4 places ahead of me. "Change places with you for 5 bob, lady," said someone else. I heard the clink of money, and then a scream in a female voice, mixed with roars of laughter from the rest of the crowd. The cheated woman leapt out of her place to fly at the man who had bilked her, but the others immediately closed up and flung her out. So, what with one thing and another, the queue had reduced itself to manageable proportions long before the bus appeared. It was a wonderful vehicle, blazing with golden light, heraldically coloured. The driver himself seemed full of light, and he used only one hand to drive with. The other he waved before his face as if to fan away the greasy steam of the rain. A growl went up from the queue as he came in sight. "Looks as if he had a good time of it, eh? Bloody pleased with himself, I bet. My dear, why didn't he behave naturally? Thinks himself too good to look at us. Who does he imagine he is? All that gilding and purple. I call it a wicked waste. Why don't they spend some of the money on their house property down here? God, I'd like to give him one in the ear hole." I could see nothing in the countenance of the driver to justify all this, unless it were that he had a look of authority and seemed intent on carrying out his job. My fellow passengers fought like hens to get on board the bus, though there was plenty of room for us all. I was the last to get in. The bus was only half full, and I selected a seat at the back, well away from the others. But a tousle-haired youth at once came and sat beside me. As he did, so we moved off. "I thought you wouldn't mind my tacking on to you," he said, "for I've noticed that you feel just as I do about the present company. Why on earth they insist on coming, I can't imagine. They won't like it at all when we get there, and they'd really be much more comfortable at home. It's different for you and me." "Do they like this place?" I asked. "As much as they'd like anything," he answered. "They've got cinemas and fish and chip shops and advertisements and all the sorts of things they want. The appalling lack of any intellectual life doesn't worry them. I realized as soon as I got here that there'd been some mistake. I ought to have taken the first bus, but I've fooled about trying to wake people up here. I found a few fellows I'd known before and tried to form a little circle, but they all seemed to have sunk to the level of their surroundings. Even before we came here, I'd had some doubts about a man like Cyril Blello. I always thought he was working in a false idiom. But he was at least intelligent. One could get some criticism worth hearing from him, even if he was a failure on the creative side. But now he seems to have nothing left but his self-conceit. The last time I tried to read him some of my own stuff, but wait a minute, I'd just like you to look at it." Realizing with a shudder that what he was producing from his pocket was a thick wad of typewritten paper, I muttered something about not having my spectacles and exclaimed, "Hello, we've left the ground." It was true. Several hundred feet below us, already half hidden in the rain and mist, the wet roofs of the town appeared, spreading without a break as far as the eye could reach. And next time, we'll carry on in chapter 2. Well, God bless you all. And do remember to pray for each other, do phone one another, and encourage each other. Bye.